Hello, and welcome to this short presentation on learning to speak and listen, how you can help your child. The first thing to say, and I'm sure you already know this, is that it's so important. Being able to communicate is the foundation for a great start in life, and it's one of the most important jobs for you as a parent. Spoken language is key to so much in life, making friends, getting a good education, and enjoying a successful career. So there are 5 key ingredients in learning how to speak and listen, and I'm going to talk you through each one of those in the following slides. But they are, first of all, attention and listening. In order to be able to learn to listen, children need to know how to pay attention and concentrate. The second one is vocabulary. That means the words that children understand and the words that children can use themselves. And we know that often children can understand more words than they can actually use themselves, and that's completely natural. Usually by the time they get to school, most children have a fairly good and rapidly growing vocabulary. This continues to increase all the way through their primary schools and secondary schools. And in fact, even into life, we're all learning new words all the time, although often we don't notice it. The third one is building sentences. This can be quite tricky. It's a tricky leap from using those words that you know in complete sentences. But being able to build sentences and understand sentences is really important to be able to communicate effectively with people and to really be able to say what you mean. The fourth one is telling stories. This doesn't just mean telling stories like storybook stories. This means being able to piece things together in the order that they happened. So to be able to tell you what they did today, or to be able to tell you what their walk was like this morning. The fifth one is conversations, and that's about understanding that conversations are two-way or maybe three-way things that children get information from and are able to give information in. It's about knowing that when somebody says something, you can respond, and when you say something, they will respond. It's important to remember here that children develop at different rates. We wouldn't expect every child to have a tooth by the time they were 5 or 6 months old, and so it is for speaking and listening too. Children develop at different rates, and that's okay. Now I'm going to talk a little more about attention and listening. Being able to hear is different from being able to listen. Lots of children have really good hearing, but they don't necessarily have really good listening skills. It's the difference between you saying something to a child who's maybe working on their iPad or watching the TV. You know very well they've heard you, their ears are good, but they haven't actually listened to what you're saying, and you either get no response or you get something that makes no sense. And this is because children have to be taught to listen. It's a skill, and like other skills, it has to be practiced. It's also really closely related, of course, to concentration. So in order to be able to listen really well, children need to be able to concentrate really well, because only then can they make sense of what you're saying. When they've heard it and they've really listened to it and thought about what it is you're saying to them, then they'll understand it. And of course, it's really hard to listen if there are lots of distractions. It makes the skill so much more difficult. It's the same for us. If we're busy and we're trying to do several things at once, or more than one person's talking to us at once, someone says something, we can't concentrate enough to really focus on what they're saying, and we either haven't heard it properly or we've forgotten it before we've even acted on it. So how can you, as a parent, help your child to learn the really important skill of listening? Well, one thing you can do is make sure that you say your child's name before you talk to them. This gives them time to realise that you've said something and to really concentrate and tune into you to see what you're going to say. It gives them a good chance to be able to think about what you're saying to them. It's also a good idea to practice giving instructions in a quiet space. You can make this into a game. I want to hear how well you can listen to this instruction and do what I say. You can start off with one instruction and then you can try two. For example, why don't you run to the door and then touch the window? See if they can follow one or two instructions. If they are following your instructions well, tell them exactly what they did well. So instead of saying, "Oh, that was great," say, "I was really impressed with you then. You listened so well, you heard exactly what I said, and you managed to follow the instruction and do it really well." It's also important to show your child good listening so that you model it for them. And I know sometimes this is really difficult because we're all busy people and we're all trying to do more than 2 or 3 things at once. But if you can set aside some time to really listen to your child and model what good listening looks like, so when they're speaking to you or you're speaking to them, to make eye contact with them, to show them that you are really concentrating on what they're saying. Find little bursts of time for this and keep it short. You can teach and practice the skills of listening through playing games. The suggestion might be to go on a listening walk and make a list of 20 things you heard on your walk. Or perhaps to play remembering games such as Mrs. Jones goes shopping and she buys, and you make the list longer and longer and see who can remember all the things on the list. Games involving lots of noise are great too if you can stand it. Songs and drums and copy me kind of games. Hand claps. I've done this pattern. Have you listened really carefully? Can you do the same one as me? So our second key ingredient was vocabulary. It's a great idea to use lots of repetition of new words when your child learns them. This really consolidates their understanding and learning of it. And to use words in games, to try and slot new words in when they're playing games. And to use lots of different words for the same thing. So, isn't that tree tall? And then see how many different words you can think of that mean the same thing. It's really high, it's really long. And to make categories of things. So you can play a game such as, how many fruit can you name? How many girls' names can you think of? How many animals can you think of? And also, words that rhyme are really brilliant. They're really brilliant not only for listening to and predicting, but they're really good for learning to read as well. So if you've got any books that have got rhyming words in them, have a little go at doing that and let your children come up with rhymes for the words. Our third key ingredient is building sentences. Now, speaking in a sentence is a big leap from using single words. And for some children, they're far into their primary school career before they can do this successfully. So don't worry too much about it. Begin very simply and make sure that you're using sentences yourself to talk about what's happening around the house. Give a running commentary on what you're doing or what they're doing. And you'll be surprised at how quickly children begin to talk in sentences and begin to use sentences quite naturally, from 2 words together to 3 words together, and so on. You can play games to help your child with sentence building. Again, you can use describing games, fun games about what do you think I'm talking about, what do you think I'm describing, guessing games, add an adjective games, that means describing words. So you might say, I have a balloon, and then your child has to add an adjective. I have a blue balloon, and then another one. I have a big blue balloon, and so on. You can also play barrier games. Barrier games are really interesting and they help you to model sentences really well for your children. So the idea is that you sit behind a cardboard barrier and your child can't see what you're doing. And you do something like, I'm going to build a tower of bricks. I've got the red brick, I'm going to put a blue one on the top. And your child has to try and copy you from behind their barrier. And when they get good at being able to copy you from behind their barrier without seeing what you're doing, just listening to your instructions, then they can begin to give instructions themselves. And that's a really good way to build sentences. Our next key ingredient is telling stories. So you can do this by talking about what's happened. Can you tell me what's happened? What did you just do in the garden out there? What have you been doing today? Share news together. You can tell your news and ask your children to tell you their news. You can share how you feel, how you're feeling. Be there to really listen and respond to them. Before children will be able to tell the stories themselves, they need to hear you doing the same thing. And so they've got a model to follow. So really listen, really respond to them. Of course, reading stories from books is really important too. You cannot ever read too many stories. Read as many as you can. Retell them in your own words and see if children can begin to retell them in their own words. Being able to retell stories or tell their own stories or have their own narratives is really important for children. It helps them to sequence ideas together, and they have to be able to tell stories orally before they can even begin thinking about writing them. And some games you can do to help with telling stories are these. Picture sequencing games are great. So you have a group of maybe 3 pictures, you can go up to 5, as many pictures as you like, and you go along and you tell the story that goes with each of those pictures. Then you can muddle them up and you can see if children can put them in the right order. This is best if the children know the story really well, so a favourite story is always a great one to do, and you can get it in the wrong order and they will tell you very quickly that you have got it in the wrong order. If you're telling stories and you're asking them to tell stories, there are some really important words to use. So the first one is who. So that's who is this about? Who are you talking about? Who are the characters in the story? Or if you're talking about your day, who were you with? The second one is where. Where did this happen? Where did this story happen? Or where were you when this happened to you? Of course, what happened? And when did it happen? And why is quite a good one too, although it's quite complicated for small children, and it's an interesting one because it's the one out of those words there that develops the most slowly, because why means we have to do some special thinking around that. But the how did they feel is a really good one too, because that helps them to be able to put emotions words to their feelings. So the fifth key element is conversation. A huge amount of our lives rely on conversations. We probably have maybe hundreds of conversations in a day with a variety of different people, some who we know really well, some who we don't know at all. There are 2 different kinds of conversations, functional and social. So for your little one, a functional conversation might be something like, I need the toilet, and you reply, okay, let's go and find one. And your conversation goes on from there. So it might be functional things about needing the toilet, being hungry, being hot, being cold, getting their needs met basically. But there are also social conversations which help you to make friends. So it might be things like, do you want to play with me? What shall we play? And these types of conversations are both really important for children in order to be successful at school, but also to make friends and feel happy and feel really settled in at school. So the best tip for that is keep commenting. So talking about what you're doing and engaging your child in that conversation so that they can answer you. You say something, they say something. Then you say something back again and the conversation keeps going. So here are some conversation games that you might like to play with your children. The first one's let's talk about. So pick something that they're really interested in. So let's talk about pirates, or let's talk about unicorns. The next one is loves and hates. So do you like apples? I really like apples. I don't like apples. So you can have a conversation about what are the differences and the similarities between the 2 of you. And of course, school and jobs. Could be jobs around the house, or it could be you talking about your job and your day and them telling you about their school and their day. I hope this has been really helpful and given you some ideas of things that you can do to really help your children to learn how to speak and how to listen.